Ma'am, take one more step toward that little boy, and you'll be leaving here in handcuffs. The command sliced through the warm afternoon air so sharply that every conversation outside Jefferson Elementary seemed to vanish at once. Parents stopped loading backpacks into SUVs. Children froze halfway across the crosswalk. Even the fluttering American flag above the school entrance seemed to pause beneath the heavy September sun. Monica Brooks turned slowly, confusion replacing the tired smile she had worn only seconds earlier. She had just finished another 14-hour overnight shift at St. Anne Medical Center, her navy blue scrubs hidden beneath a light gray sweater, her employee badge still clipped to her pocket. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes, but when she spotted 8-year-old Noah running toward her with his backpack bouncing behind him, exhaustion had disappeared for a brief, beautiful moment. Now that moment was gone. Standing between Monica and her son was Officer Ethan Collins, a white patrol officer whose expression carried absolute certainty. One hand rested near his duty belt while the other remained raised, signaling Monica to stay exactly where she was. Noah slowed to a stop, his bright smile fading into uncertainty as he looked from the officer back to his mother. "Mom," he called softly, his small voice barely carrying across the crowded pickup lane. Monica instinctively lifted one hand toward him, her palm open, her voice calm despite the sudden knot tightening inside her chest. "It's okay, sweetheart. Stay right there." Officer Collins stepped sideways, blocking the space between them. "Do not instruct the child," he said firmly. "We received a report of a suspicious woman attempting to remove a student from school grounds." A murmur spread through the crowd like wind through dry leaves. Several parents exchanged uneasy glances. Someone quietly pulled out a phone. Another whispered that the officer must know something everyone else didn't. Monica blinked once, then looked toward the school entrance where teachers were beginning to notice the growing circle. "Officer," she said carefully, "I'm Noah's mother. His school has my ID on file. They know me here." Collins never looked away from her. "That's something we'll verify after you cooperate." Monica inhaled slowly. Years of working emergency rooms had taught her that panic spread faster than reason. She lowered her shoulders, keeping every movement deliberate. "My purse is on the passenger seat of my car," she explained gently. "My driver's license, his birth certificate copy, everything you need is right there." Collins glanced briefly toward the silver SUV parked along the curb before returning his attention to Monica. "Stay where you are." Noah's fingers tightened around the straps of his backpack. "She's really my mom," he said, louder this time. "She picks me up every day she's not working late." Collins offered the boy a practiced smile that never reached his eyes. "We're just making sure you're safe, buddy." Monica watched Noah's confidence begin to crumble beneath the attention of dozens of strangers. Some parents were staring with sympathy. Others with suspicion. Cameras continued to rise above the crowd, tiny black lenses reflecting the afternoon sunlight. Monica swallowed the ache growing in her throat. She had spent years teaching Noah that kindness was stronger than anger, that dignity mattered most when life became unfair. This was one of those moments. She straightened her posture, folded her trembling hands together, and looked directly at Officer Collins without raising her voice. "Please," she said quietly, "whatever misunderstanding brought you here, don't let my son become frightened because of it." The silence outside Jefferson Elementary grew heavier with every passing second. Monica could hear the distant rumble of a school bus pulling away, the soft rustling of oak leaves above the parking lot, and the uneven rhythm of her own heartbeat, yet her expression remained remarkably composed. She had learned years ago that calm was sometimes the only thing a frightened child could borrow from an adult. Noah's wide brown eyes never left her face, searching for reassurance instead of answers. That instinct alone reminded Monica why every exhausting sacrifice had always been worth making. 5 years earlier, life had looked entirely different. She had been a young wife with dreams of finishing graduate school before building a career in pediatric nursing. Then an unexpected illness took her husband within months, leaving her with a mountain of medical bills, a grieving toddler, and a future she had never imagined facing alone. Friends offered sympathy. Family offered what little they could. But every morning, Monica chose to stand back up. She enrolled in night classes, accepted every extra hospital shift available, and slowly rebuilt a life held together by determination instead of certainty. Now she worked overnight in the emergency department at St. Anne Medical Center, often caring for strangers through the darkest hours while knowing her own son was sleeping safely across town with a trusted neighbor until sunrise. Her apartment was modest, her furniture mismatched, and her savings account rarely gave her room to breathe, but Noah never went to bed hungry, never missed a school project, and never doubted that his mother loved him beyond measure. Every Friday evening they shared homemade pizza, watched old family movies, and read one chapter from the same adventure novel before bed. Those traditions cost almost nothing, yet Monica believed they were worth more than anything money could buy. She often reminded Noah that people would remember how you treated others long after they forgot what you owned. He repeated those words so often that his third-grade teacher once wrote them on the classroom bulletin board. That quiet kindness had become part of who he was. Even now, surrounded by strangers watching an uncomfortable misunderstanding unfold, Noah did not cry or shout. He simply stood still because his mother had taught him that respect never depended on how others behaved. Across the pickup lane, several teachers exchanged concerned looks, recognizing Monica almost immediately. She volunteered at school reading events whenever her hospital schedule allowed, donated gently used books to the classroom library, and somehow still found time to bake cupcakes for Noah's birthday despite finishing 12-hour shifts only hours before. Many parents knew her face, although few knew the long nights hidden behind her warm smile. Monica noticed Mrs. Alvarez, Noah's teacher, stepping cautiously toward the office entrance, clearly uncertain whether to interrupt an active police investigation. The principal appeared behind her, speaking quietly into a handheld radio while looking toward the growing crowd. More phones had appeared. Conversations remained hushed, but the attention felt impossible to escape. Monica took another slow breath, refusing to let embarrassment replace dignity. She understood that facts usually arrived more slowly than assumptions. She only prayed the truth would arrive before this moment became the memory Noah carried with him for the rest of his childhood. Officer Ethan Collins had spent nearly 12 years wearing a badge, and somewhere along the way he had begun trusting his first impression more than verified facts. He believed experience had sharpened his instincts into something almost infallible. Fellow officers often described him as decisive, confident, and unwilling to hesitate when a situation appeared unusual. His supervisors appreciated quick decisions, especially around schools where every report involving a child was treated with urgency. That confidence had slowly become certainty, and certainty had quietly become a habit of ignoring explanations that did not fit the picture already formed in his mind. Earlier that afternoon, a nervous caller had reported seeing what they described as a woman lingering near the elementary school before dismissal. The caller claimed the woman looked exhausted, kept watching the entrance, and was driving an expensive silver sport utility vehicle that seemed out of place. The information reached dispatch only minutes before students were released, and Collins happened to be the closest unit available. By the time he pulled into the pickup lane, the report had already settled into his thoughts as something more than suspicion. He scanned the crowd, noticed Monica standing beside the silver vehicle, saw Noah running toward her, and allowed his conclusion to arrive before a single question had been asked. In his mind he was already preventing a possible crime instead of investigating one. Around them, the atmosphere continued changing by the second. More parents gathered along the sidewalk, whispering quietly while pretending not to stare. A few children sensed the tension without understanding it and instinctively moved closer to teachers. Smartphones remained raised above shoulders, recording every word and every expression. The afternoon sunshine reflected across windshields, making the entire parking lot shimmer beneath a cloudless sky, yet the warmth seemed unable to reach anyone standing inside the growing circle. Mrs. Alvarez finally stepped closer, clutching the attendant's clipboard against her chest. She recognized Monica immediately and opened her mouth to speak, but Collins lifted one hand politely without taking his eyes off Monica. "Ma'am, please remain where you are for the moment," he said. His tone remained controlled, but it carried the unmistakable authority of someone convinced he was protecting the public. The principal stopped several feet away, uncertain whether interrupting would complicate matters further. Monica noticed both educators trying to find the right moment to speak, yet neither wanted to interfere with an active investigation. She understood their hesitation, and strangely, that realization made her feel even more alone. Noah shifted his weight from one sneaker to the other, clutching the straps of his backpack so tightly that his knuckles turned pale. He looked from the familiar faces of his teachers back to his mother, silently waiting for an adult to explain why something so ordinary had suddenly become frightening. Collins reached for the small notepad tucked inside his uniform pocket and began asking routine identification questions, writing carefully without once looking up. Monica answered each one clearly and respectfully, never raising her voice, even as every truthful answer seemed to disappear into the certainty already fixed behind the officer's steady blue eyes. The distance between suspicion and truth had never felt wider, and no one standing there realized that the next few minutes would change far more lives than they could possibly imagine. Monica remained exactly where she stood, her shoulders relaxed even though every instinct urged her to run across the pickup lane and wrap Noah in her arms. She knew that one sudden movement could deepen a misunderstanding that had already grown far beyond reason. Instead, she placed both hands where everyone could see them and spoke with the same calm voice she used every night inside crowded emergency rooms when frightened patients searched for someone steady enough to believe. "Officer, I respect that you have a job to do," she said quietly. "Please allow the school staff to confirm who I am before this goes any further." Her words carried no anger, only quiet confidence. Collins glanced briefly toward the principal but shook his head. "We will verify everything through official procedure," he answered. "Until then, everyone stays where they are." Monica nodded once. She refused to argue. She refused to let Noah remember his mother raising her voice in front of dozens of strangers. The afternoon breeze drifted through the line of maple trees surrounding the parking lot, carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass across the sidewalks. Somewhere beyond the school fence, a lawnmower hummed steadily, an ordinary sound that felt strangely distant from the tense silence surrounding them. Noah looked at his mother with frightened eyes. "Mom, did I do something wrong?" he asked softly. Monica's heart tightened, but her expression never changed. She smiled gently, the same reassuring smile she had worn through scraped knees, sleepless nights, and difficult homework assignments. "No, sweetheart," she answered. "You did everything right. I am proud of you. Just stay calm for me." Noah slowly nodded, swallowing the fear building inside him. Those simple words seemed to steady him more than anyone realized. Several parents watching nearby exchanged uncomfortable glances. A father quietly whispered that the woman did not seem dangerous at all. Another parent recognized Monica from school volunteer events and started walking toward the principal. Mrs. Alvarez finally found the courage to speak. "Officer," she called respectfully, "I know this family. Monica Brooks has picked Noah up many times." Collins acknowledged her with a quick glance but remained focused on procedure. "Thank you, ma'am. I still need independent verification before releasing anyone." The principal stepped closer, holding a tablet connected to the school's student records. "Officer Collins," he said calmly, "we can confirm emergency contacts and identification inside the office within a minute." Collins hesitated for the first time since arriving. The certainty that had guided every decision began meeting small pieces of conflicting information. Even so, he remained cautious. "Nobody moves until dispatch finishes checking the vehicle registration," he replied. Monica noticed the dispatcher speaking through the officer's shoulder radio, but the transmission crackled with static before becoming impossible to understand. Precious seconds slipped away. Around them, more phones continued recording. Some people had already begun streaming the scene live, while others quietly encouraged everyone to remain respectful until the facts became clear. Monica closed her eyes for a brief moment, inhaling slowly before opening them again. She silently reminded herself that truth did not become weaker simply because it arrived later than suspicion. She only hoped Noah would remember her composure far longer than he remembered the fear surrounding them that afternoon. The dispatch radio finally cleared for just a moment before dissolving back into static, leaving Officer Collins with only fragments instead of confirmation. He frowned, pressed the button on his shoulder microphone again, and repeated the vehicle registration request with growing impatience. The answer did not come quickly enough. Around them, uncertainty continued feeding speculation. Some people believed the officer was preventing something terrible. Others quietly questioned why a calm mother standing in broad daylight outside her own child's school was being treated as though she had already done something wrong. The invisible line between caution and assumption had become thinner than anyone realized. Noah took one hesitant step forward, tears beginning to gather in his eyes despite every effort to stay brave. "Please," he whispered, "I just want to go home with my mom." Monica looked directly at him, refusing to let her own fear become his. "Remember what we talked about," she said gently. "Take slow breaths. Everything begins with the truth, and the truth always finds its way." Noah nodded, inhaling deeply exactly as she had taught him after nightmares and difficult days. Several parents watching nearby lowered their phones, visibly moved by the quiet exchange. Even those who had never met Monica before found it difficult to reconcile the frightened child before them with the suspicion hanging over the scene. Mrs. Alvarez stepped closer again, this time carrying Noah's student folder. "Officer," she said carefully, "his emergency contact information is right here. Monica Brooks is listed as his mother. The records have been verified since the first day of school." Collins looked toward the folder but did not immediately accept it. "School records are helpful," he replied, "but I still need to complete the investigation according to department procedure." The principal exchanged a troubled glance with Mrs. Alvarez. He had expected the misunderstanding to end minutes ago. Instead, it seemed to grow heavier with every passing second. A local television news van happened to drive past the intersection, slowing briefly as the growing crowd became impossible to ignore. More cameras appeared. More whispers followed. Monica realized this moment might soon exist far beyond the school parking lot. She quietly closed her eyes for a heartbeat, not in defeat but in prayer that Noah would not carry shame from something neither of them had caused. The sunlight reflected across the polished hood of her silver sport utility vehicle, where her hospital parking permit remained clearly visible beneath the windshield. Her lunch cooler still rested on the front passenger seat beside neatly folded discharge paperwork she had forgotten to remove after finishing her overnight shift. Ordinary details. Ordinary evidence of an ordinary life. Yet none of it seemed strong enough to overcome a conclusion already formed. Then Collins's radio crackled once more. He listened silently, his expression remaining unreadable. Whatever dispatch reported, it was incomplete. He looked back toward Monica, then toward Noah, then toward the waiting crowd. "Until I receive full confirmation," he announced, "everyone remains exactly where they are." A disappointed murmur spread through the parking lot. Monica lowered her gaze for only a moment before lifting it again with quiet resolve. She could not control the assumptions surrounding her, but she could still control the example her son would remember. Somewhere beyond the line of parked cars, unnoticed by everyone gathered outside the school, the low, steady sound of a powerful engine rolled closer, carrying someone whose arrival would soon change the direction of the entire afternoon. The sound of the approaching engine faded into the background as if the afternoon itself had decided to hold its breath. Nothing moved for a long moment except the leaves drifting gently across the edge of the parking lot and the loose strap of Noah's backpack swaying in the breeze. Monica stood quietly beneath the warm September sunlight, her hands still folded in front of her, her shoulders steady despite the weight pressing against her heart. She no longer looked at the gathering crowd or the phones pointed in her direction. Her eyes rested only on Noah. In that silent exchange between mother and son, there was no panic, no anger, only a promise that somehow everything would be all right. Noah slowly wiped away the tears collecting beneath his eyes. He remembered something his mother had once told him after a difficult day at school. Courage did not always look like standing up and shouting. Sometimes courage looked like standing still when your heart wanted to run. He took another slow breath exactly as she had taught him and placed one small hand over his chest. Monica smiled softly when she noticed. It was almost invisible, but Noah saw it immediately. That tiny smile gave him enough strength to stop trembling. A gentle gust carried the familiar scent of fresh pine from the playground beyond the school building. The swings rocked slightly, although no children remained there anymore. The afternoon dismissal had ended several minutes earlier, yet the parking lot felt frozen in time, as though everyone had become part of a photograph waiting for someone to finally explain what they were seeing. Mrs. Alvarez quietly lowered the student folder she was still holding. The principal glanced once more toward Officer Collins before looking at Monica with unmistakable concern. Neither educator spoke again. They understood that every additional word risked making an already fragile situation even more complicated. Monica slowly reached into the pocket of her sweater. Collins watched carefully but did not interrupt as she pulled out a small, worn photograph protected inside a clear plastic sleeve. She did not raise it for anyone else to see. She simply looked down at it for a brief moment. The picture showed two smiling children standing beside an older woman on the front porch of a modest Georgia home many years ago. Monica gently brushed her thumb across the image of the tall teenage boy standing beside her younger self. His arm rested protectively across her shoulders, and both of them were laughing at something outside the frame. Her grandmother used to say that family was not measured by how often people stood beside you but by how quickly they came when your world became heavy. Monica quietly whispered those words to herself, barely loud enough for even the wind to hear. She slipped the photograph back into her pocket without anyone noticing whose face it held. Noah watched every movement from across the pickup lane, recognizing the picture immediately because his mother kept it with her everywhere she went. It had always reminded her that no matter how difficult life became, she was never truly alone. Far beyond the circle of waiting parents and parked cars, the low rumble of the approaching vehicle grew louder before stopping somewhere just outside the school entrance. A driver stepped out, closed the door with quiet precision, and began walking toward the crowd with calm, unhurried confidence. Almost no one turned to look. The few who did had no idea that the next person to enter the parking lot was about to change not only the direction of the investigation, but also the lives of everyone standing there. The man walked with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime entering difficult places without needing to announce himself. He wore faded blue jeans, a charcoal button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms, and a weathered leather watch that looked older than Noah. Nothing about him invited attention, yet heads began turning anyway. His posture was straight, his pace measured, and his eyes missed nothing. He stopped only long enough to take in the entire scene before continuing toward Monica. She saw him almost immediately. For the first time that afternoon, the tension in her face softened. She did not wave or call his name. She simply released a slow breath she had been holding since the moment Officer Collins stepped between her and Noah. The man reached the edge of the crowd and looked first at Noah. "You doing all right, buddy?" he asked calmly. Noah nodded, although his eyes were still damp. "Uncle Marcus," he whispered with unmistakable relief. Several parents exchanged curious glances. Officer Collins stepped forward, maintaining his professional posture. "Sir, this is an active investigation. I need you to remain behind the line." The newcomer stopped without protest. "Of course," he answered evenly. "My name is Marcus Brooks. Monica is my younger sister, and that little boy is my nephew." His voice carried neither frustration nor challenge. It was steady, respectful, almost disarmingly calm. Collins studied him for a moment. Do you have identification? Marcus reached slowly into his back pocket and handed over his driver's license without hesitation. Then he removed a second card from a slim leather holder. Collins glanced down, expecting little more than another form of identification. Instead, his expression changed almost imperceptibly. The card identified Marcus Brooks as an active United States Army Master Sergeant assigned to a Special Operations Command. Marcus did not mention his unit. He did not explain his career. He simply waited while Collins read the information in silence. I was driving through town after returning from Fort Liberty, Marcus said quietly. My sister called me earlier this morning to let me know she would be picking Noah up after her hospital shift. When I saw several missed calls from neighbors and friends, I came straight here. Monica looked at him with tired eyes. I did not call you, she said softly. Marcus offered the faintest smile. No. But half the neighborhood did. Around them, more phones slowly lowered. The atmosphere shifted in ways that were difficult to explain. It was not because of Marcus's military background alone. It was the way he carried himself. He asked no one to step aside. He demanded nothing. Instead, he turned toward the principal. Sir, may I ask one question? The principal nodded immediately. Can the school confirm Noah's emergency contacts and his family records in front of everyone here? Yes, the principal answered. We can. Before anyone moved, Officer Collins's shoulder radio crackled loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Dispatch had finally completed the registration check. The silver sport utility vehicle was legally registered to Monica Brooks. Her driver's license was valid. There were no alerts, no warrants, no missing child report, and no evidence supporting the original suspicion. The words hung in the afternoon air with a weight far heavier than the static that had delayed them. Collins slowly lowered the identification cards in his hands. For the first time since arriving outside Jefferson Elementary, certainty gave way to unmistakable realization, and an uncomfortable silence settled across the parking lot as every eye turned toward Monica. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. The late afternoon breeze drifted through the parking lot again, carrying away the last traces of conversation until only the soft rustle of leaves remained. Officer Collins stared at the dispatch information displayed on the screen inside his patrol vehicle, then looked back toward Monica. Every verified record contradicted the conclusion he had reached within moments of arriving. The registration belonged to her. The driver's license matched perfectly. The school confirmed she was Noah's mother. The emergency contacts had been verified months earlier. The misunderstanding that had drawn so much attention had never been supported by evidence. Collins slowly handed Marcus his identification cards. Master Sergeant Brooks, he said quietly, thank you for your cooperation. Marcus accepted the cards with a small nod. Everyone deserves the chance to be heard before conclusions are made, he replied calmly. There was no anger in his voice, no attempt to embarrass the officer in front of the growing crowd. His words were measured, almost gentle, yet they carried enough weight to settle over everyone standing nearby. Collins turned toward Monica. For the first time, the confidence that had defined his posture all afternoon gave way to visible humility. Mrs. Brooks, he said, I owe you an apology. I should have allowed the available information to be verified before allowing this situation to escalate. I am sorry for the distress this caused you and your son. Monica remained silent for a moment. She looked first at Noah, then at Marcus, before returning her attention to the officer. Her face showed exhaustion more than anger. The long hospital shift, the unexpected public scrutiny, and the emotional strain had left their mark, but they had not taken away her composure. Officer, she answered softly, I understand the importance of protecting children. I see frightened families every day in the emergency room. I know quick decisions sometimes have to be made. But there is a difference between acting quickly and assuming the worst before listening. Collins lowered his eyes briefly. Several parents who had continued recording throughout the incident slowly put their phones away. The atmosphere had changed completely. Where there had been whispers and uncertainty only minutes earlier, there was now an uncomfortable awareness that assumptions could leave wounds even after the truth appeared. Mrs. Alvarez walked Noah across the remaining distance. The little boy immediately wrapped both arms around his mother without saying a word. Monica knelt and held him close, resting her cheek gently against the top of his head. She closed her eyes for just a moment, grateful that the longest afternoon of his young life was finally beginning to end. Marcus stood quietly beside them, saying nothing. He had not come to rescue his sister with rank or authority. He had simply arrived with patience, respect, and confidence in the truth. The principal stepped forward and addressed the parents gathered around the pickup lane. "Thank you for remaining calm," he said. "Today reminds all of us how important facts are before judgment." Monica slowly stood, still holding Noah's hand. She looked once more toward Officer Collins. "I do not want revenge," she said. "I only hope the next family is given the opportunity to explain before becoming the center of a misunderstanding like this." Those words settled over the parking lot with greater force than any raised voice could have achieved, and even Collins understood that the lesson he would remember from that afternoon had very little to do with police procedure and everything to do with listening before deciding. The parking lot slowly returned to the familiar rhythm of an ordinary school afternoon. Parents climbed into their vehicles. Teachers walked the last few students toward waiting families. The flashing lights on the patrol car disappeared one final time before Officer Collins quietly drove away, carrying with him a lesson no report could fully describe. Monica stood beside her silver sport utility vehicle for a moment without speaking. The sunlight had softened into the warm amber glow of early evening, stretching long shadows across the pavement where fear had stood only an hour before. Noah slipped his small hand into hers as naturally as breathing, and together they walked toward the driver's side door. Before climbing inside, Noah looked up at his mother with the honest curiosity only a child could carry. "Mom," he asked quietly, "were you scared?" Monica smiled as she brushed a loose curl away from his forehead. "Yes," she answered truthfully. "Sometimes brave people are scared too. Being brave does not mean you never feel afraid. It means you choose kindness even when fear is trying to speak for you." Noah thought about her words for a long moment before nodding. "I want to be like that." Monica gently squeezed his hand. "You already are." A few yards away, Marcus leaned against his truck, watching them with quiet pride. He had spent years in places where calm decisions meant everything, yet nothing felt more important than seeing his little sister and nephew safe again. Monica walked over and wrapped her arms around him without saying a word. He hugged her just as gently, the same way he had when she was a little girl frightened by thunderstorms back in Georgia. "Grandma was right," Marcus said softly. "Family always comes." Monica smiled through tired eyes. She never missed. As they prepared to leave, the principal approached carrying Noah's backpack, which had been left near the school entrance during the confusion. "Mrs. Brooks," he said warmly, "our school is fortunate to have families like yours. Thank you for showing every child here what dignity looks like." Monica accepted the backpack with quiet gratitude. "Thank you for standing by the truth," she replied. The principal watched as Noah climbed into the back seat and carefully buckled himself in. Before closing the door, the little boy looked across the parking lot one last time. Several parents who had witnessed everything offered small waves and gentle smiles. One little girl from his class raised her hand and called, "See you tomorrow, Noah." He smiled back, and the weight that had settled over his young heart finally began to lift. The engine started with its familiar gentle hum. Monica adjusted the rearview mirror until she could see Noah smiling in the back seat. Marcus climbed into his own truck behind them, not because she needed protection anymore, but simply because that was what older brothers did. As both vehicles pulled away from Jefferson Elementary, the golden light reflected across their windshields, turning the road ahead into a ribbon of quiet promise. The school grew smaller in the mirrors, but the lesson remained clear. Assumptions can arrive in seconds, while truth often takes patience. Respect costs nothing, yet it can spare a family from unnecessary pain. And sometimes the strongest person in the hardest moment is not the one with the loudest voice, but the one who chooses grace when the world expects anger. The evening sky stretched wide above the highway, painted in shades of gold and blue, while Monica drove toward home with Noah safely beside her and Marcus following close behind, and for the first time that day, the silence no longer felt heavy. It felt like peace.